everyone running really needs to keep in mind when there is so much hype around. It's just like trust in your own plan and stay in your own lane a bit.
I did 3-hour time on feet run last week and I was just on my own. But I actually think that's good. I'd rather do those runs on my own sometimes. It's good practice for the race where you could be on your own. You're with your own thoughts, like how do I break down the time, the distance, the fueling, which is really good to practice all of that.
This is going to sound so sad, but actually I think it's become like my best friend.
Today we have a very exciting 6th mile. Thanks to all you wonderful listeners who have tuned in every week, we have been able to grow this podcast and bring on a brand new team member, our producer, Georgie.
Hello.
So thanks so much, Georgie, for joining us on the pod. And we're going to chat to you all about your running journey and everything else running related in a bit.
Yeah,
I'm so excited to have you here, honestly.
I feel completely like, it feels really inappropriate that you guys are going to be chatting to me about my running journey. And I'm just like the most like average runner ever, but I'm very excited to be here. Been a listener for a really long time, so it's a bit serendipitous and a bit surreal that I'm sitting on the sofa with you guys, to be honest. But yeah, delighted.
Well, you're also doing London Marathon as well, which is very fitting as I'm doing it too. So I think we'll be surprised by, you say you're an average runner, but as we'll chat about in a bit, probably a lot of our like concerns, training approaches, worries about the race are the same. We can get into all that.
Mm-hmm.
And every runner's journey is as important as each other's. So
Totally.
Don't put yours down. Okay, so first of all, though, Rose, let's do a bit of an update since our last 6th mile episode when we were in Cape Town.
Yes.
So it's been 4 weeks.
Gosh, it looks a bit different, doesn't it?
It does.
You know what? I've really, really tried to not whinge about the weather. And I knew it was going to be bad. So Charlie and I like made a pact. We're like, right, like the only way is positivity. Like we won't whinge about the weather. I've tried and I failed. I can't stop.
I failed as soon as I stepped off the plane.
It's so
I
cold.
stepped outside and my tan was gone and I just haven't warmed up for 3 weeks.
I know, me neither. It is so cold.
But it is actually genuinely cold as well. So it's like not even that you are struggling to adjust. Like it is a cold winter.
Yes.
So it's really
it's
really
a real shock to the system. I kind of feel like I'm not really in a position where I can whinge that much because I've spent 6 weeks in South Africa and then I'm going to America, but it hasn't stopped me.
Yeah, no, I think some of these listeners are really going to hate us. But...
Yeah. So I think that's, to be honest, the training has been going well, but just frigid.
Okay. Frigid. So are there some positives to being at home?
Well, so this was the other thing. Like, I've been whinging so much that I'm driving myself nuts. So I was like, every morning I've got to think about 3 things that I'm grateful for, like home life.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I happy to be back? And I'm basically stuck on the same 3, which is my coffee machine, which is fantastic, and my supply of Pace coffee, which is unbeatable, Willow, and my bed.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of 3 different ones each day, and like I can't get past those 3. I mean, maybe Bushy Park's quite nice.
Yeah. Mine are similar to yours. I mean, like being back with Nelly is great. And my bed too. Like, honestly, I've been sleeping so well since I've been home. That has been a real positive.
Yeah.
Because I think the early starts in Cape Town, they do get to you a little bit. Because it's really hard to go to sleep really early to get enough sleep every night.
Yeah.
I think. So.
And the heat as well. I mean,
yes.
I loved the heat, but just not when I was trying to sleep.
Yes.
So there is, I mean, that probably is my best positive of the cold weather. It's better to sleep. But apart from that, to be quite frank, I'm missing it.
So can you tell us a bit how your training for London Marathon's going? Because when this is released, it will be less than 8 weeks to go.
Yes, that's slightly terrifying. But it's going well. I think being back in London, it feels like London Marathon fever is here. Being in Cape Town, obviously not many people are doing London Marathon, so it kind of doesn't feel that real. Yeah. And then coming back, it's just the hype is here, which instantly makes you panic a bit and think, oh my God, it's next week. And I've got to keep reminding myself I've still got quite a long time to go and I need to be patient and just, tick off the weeks. But yeah, it's going well so far. Got some good marathon sessions in, which always starts to like build the confidence. I feel like those big long run sessions are the ones that get me really ready for the marathon.
100%. Yeah.
So I've done a couple of those now, which is really nice to have in the bank.
How have you found it now? Like you say, loads of people talking about London whilst you're in London. Do you feel the pressure or like the feeling that you should be doing certain things with your training because you're hearing what other people are doing? How do you kind of block that out?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's something I was thinking about the other day. Philly actually posted something really good about it on her channel as well, because everyone is posting like so much about their training and tips, and this totally applies for anyone running the London Marathon. Like those tips and updates are really helpful, but it's so easy to get dragged into it, and marathon training is so different for people. Like even if you look at the elite start line, you know, our marathon times are a few minutes apart, and yet all of our training looks pretty different. Like people do different mileage, very different sessions. Like there's a reason we don't really train together, and that's just because it's not because we all hate each other. It's just because our training is quite different and we need to do what works for us. So I think that's something everyone running really needs to keep in mind when there is so much hype around it. It's just like trust in your own plan and stay in your own lane a bit.
Yeah, it's so true, because you see some people doing like really speedy track sessions, and you might be someone that does more like longer tempos, and that's what really gets you fit.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh wait, should I be doing like the short stuff as well? But that's
and
not
before
necessarily
you know
the
it,
case.
you're doing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely something I have to really keep in mind. But you know, thankfully I've got my coach who keeps me in the straight and narrow.
I'm really excited to follow the journey.
And for you, it is how many weeks durations?
Now it'll be less than 5 when this comes out. Yeah.
So I mean, a good chunk of the block done.
Yeah, it is that scary to think about, but I feel like very much in the block, which is good. And I've very much feel like I'm training for an ultra, which is also good because it does feel different to marathon training. Like, for example, I did 3-hour time on feet run last week, and like very hilly, like ran around Box Hill, and I ran over a marathon. So it was obviously like not slow, but it's just like really good practice to break down the time and distance when you know you're setting out for such a long amount of time. And I was just on my own, and it's like, but I actually think that's good. I'd rather do those runs on my own sometimes, because I think it's good practice for the race where you could be on your own. You're with your own thoughts. Like, how do I break down the time, the distance, the fueling, which is really good to practice all of that. And it went well. And that's what's a confidence boost. It's like you're basically replicating race day, obviously not as far, but you're thinking, okay, if I can do that, then I can do that on race day as well.
Yeah. How did you break down the time? Because that is a long run
so
by yourself.
The loops were like just under 8 miles. So I had to do 3 and then an out and back. So it's like 3.5 laps basically. So I almost just thought of it as laps. And it's so crazy how when you think you're only doing 3 and a bit laps, how quickly 8 miles, like the first one went, and I'm like, I've already done almost 8 miles. You don't think of it as like, if you were just going for an 8-mile run, it can feel quite long sometimes.
Yeah.
So it was just like, okay, I've done the first one. That felt easy because you're fresh. You get through the second one, you're like, okay, I'm getting a bit tired now. And then like, okay, I've just got to get through one more. And once you did one more, I was like, okay, now I just got to do an out and back. So just kind of focused on like kind of each lap.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
And what goes up must come down. So you have the zigzag of Box Hill, which is the climb. And then you have like a nice downhill as well. So it's like make the most of just feeling good on the down.
Yeah, nice. But as you said, that's such a good run to get in the bank.
Yeah.
It must be a big confidence boost just to have done that distance.
Yeah.
And you haven't got that much further to go in the race. Like it's a very attainable distance.
Yeah. So I'll have like probably another one of those, which will be maybe 10, 15 minutes longer. But that almost doesn't feel too daunting, because now I've done that, I'm like, well, I could do 10 minutes more or whatever. So
yeah.
Amazing. No, excited.
And Georgie, we need to hear all about how your London Marathon training is going. But first off, in 5 Miles Easy tradition, we need to ask you, what is your why for running? Because that's the question we ask all our guests.
Oh, gosh. Okay, it's changed in the 2 years that I've been running properly. So when I first started, it was basically just to get in shape. Like, that was it. And I also I had this weird idea that I wanted to do a triathlon. I have no idea where it came from, but I think it was basically just going to be an opportunity to brag about something on social media. So I just thought, right, let's let's get running. So that was it initially, very sort of surface level. And then this is going to sound so sad, but actually I think you said this. I think you said this and I kind of really resonated with it. It's become like my best friend.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's the friend that motivates me. It's the friend that empowers me. It's the friend that kind of, you know, I can lean on when other things aren't going great in my life. It's like a constant, consistent thing that makes me feel really good about myself. It's not always the healthiest. Like occasionally we have fallouts, and I'll probably talk more about that when it comes to London Marathon training, but it just makes me feel like me. And I just don't know what I'd do without it. So that's my why now, currently. I'm sure it will change again, but for the moment, that's where we're at. That's where we're up to.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely do say that
Yeah.
it is because you can just rely on it. You know, you can't rely on everyone in the world, but running, you know, it's always there for you.
Always got it. Yeah, I always thought that to myself, and I thought it's too sad to say that out loud. But then I heard you say that. Steph,
Yeah,
I thought, okay,
I know it's so cringy.
I can say
but
that.
it's
fine.
true.
Yeah.
It is true.
And it's always a place that you go that if you know, if you're stressed, if you're down, if you're happy, like any emotion,
Yeah.
a run fits.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's great.
Totally.
So you are training for London Marathon, as
Sure
we've
am.
already said.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going? Because it's also less than 8 weeks to go for you.
Yeah, less than 8 weeks. Okay, how is it going? I mean, it was going really well, if I say so myself. I'm just using your run-of-the-mill runner plan, and I really swear by runner. I've used it, for basically the 2 years I've been running. So I'm using a runner plan, and it was going really, really well. And I was sort of hitting the paces that I felt like I was supposed to be hitting, and the plan was telling me I needed to hit. And then I got flu for 2 weeks, except it kind of went on longer than 2 weeks because the week before I was so fatigued, and you know, I just couldn't. Every single effort just felt so much harder than it should have done. And then last week was my first week back running, and that felt so tough because I'd sort of had 2 weeks of just sitting on a sofa, and I was like, where are my muscles gone? I was looking for them. I just thought, well, they're not here. So honestly, I feel like I've lost a month of really productive training. So there's the physical side of that, and then there's the mental side of that. And I had a long run to do last week where I was meant to do the second half of it at race pace, and I just basically imploded. I was probably physically capable of doing it, but I just convinced myself I couldn't. And I found myself sitting in Battersea Park on a bench crying to myself. And I just, you know, it really just was a confidence thing. So this morning, actually, after we spoke yesterday, spoke to Rose and Steph yesterday, and they both gave me a bit of a pep talk. I went out again this morning with my mum. Basically I redid the long run last week, but I did it and I hit the paces that I was supposed to be hitting. But
Amazing.
yeah, my mum came along with me on her bike, and she won't mind me saying this, she's not the best cyclist, but she calls herself the Spitfire. And she was just like, also sort of takes on this weird American alter ego where she like shouts at me in a really strong American accent, like encouraging me. So yeah, so basically, as of this morning, marathon training, I think, is back on track.
That's amazing.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope it's amazing.
Which shows you that so much of it is in your head.
Yeah.
Yes, some of it obviously was physical because you were ill, and it
Yeah.
just takes a few days to like get your legs going again. But also in a week, it's not like your fitness has changed. Right.
Sure.
So you can do it. You've told yourself you could do it, and you hit the paces today when you couldn't last week.
Yeah. And this is exactly what we were saying yesterday, wasn't it? It's like you don't, you know, have a couple of bad weeks or ill and you're off, and it feels like such a long period, and that you've completely forgotten how to run. And then it actually only takes like a week of good training and one good session to feel like you're back on track.
Yeah.
And that's always something to keep in mind. I think it's just, that is the reality of marathon training, is it's never amazing all the time.
No.
And I think you always think about the last session. If the last session isn't good, it's like, oh my God, I've got so far to go.
Yeah.
The last session is good, it's like, I'm smashing it.
Oh yeah, I'm convinced I'm an absolute elite runner. I'm a weapon. I'm a winner. Like,
You
my gosh, I'm
absolutely
amazing.
are. And you've got 2 months. Like,
I know,
it takes
I
1
know.
week of good training to suddenly be like, right, here I
Yeah.
am. So
The thing is, I've put a little bit more pressure on myself because I in sort of my enjoyment of running doesn't actually come from running quickly. I just enjoy actually running really quite slowly. An easy run for me is just amazing. I love an easy run. But I've set myself, because I actually ran the London Marathon last year and I'm running it again this year for charity, it felt wrong to ask people to sponsor me to run it again when it's something I really enjoy doing and I already know I can do it. So I've set myself a time goal, and I've been quite public about that time goal sort of within the kind of running community. I mean, I'm absolutely not an influencer like the 10 people that follow me, but I've put this pressure on myself, which I've not had when it comes to running before. So obviously that's something that you guys are super familiar with, but I'm not coping well with the pressure, guys. I don't think I'm cut out for elite running lifestyle. So yeah, that's putting another sort of, another dimension to marathon training, but it is what it is. I'm enjoying it. It's a privilege to be able to run a marathon. So yeah, enjoying it.
are you able to say your time goal here, or is that too public?
No, look, it's already out there. There's no harm, telling however many listeners you guys have got. But I'm hoping to run a good for age time, which is currently, I think the benchmark is 3 hours 40. Before I got ill, I was hoping to run sub 3:20. I'm now going for the good for age time. So I'm now going for about 3:40. But having run London last year, I ended up running something like 15 minutes slower than I had thought I would. But I would say that that wasn't necessarily my fault. It was just so congested that I couldn't actually really have run much faster if I'd wanted to. I was like at points having to slow to a walk to basically get through. So I would like to ultimately feel confident that I could run a 3:30 marathon, to know that I've got a little bit of buffer room when inevitably things get really cramped and I have to shoot off the course for a wee. So yeah, that's what we're going for. 3:30, I think.
Are you in a different wave or anything compared to last year? Like, can you avoid some of the congestion?
Well, I've been a little bit cheeky. I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to. I've started. I've actually said that I'm going to run it a lot faster than I will. I've said that I'm going to run it at about a 3 hour 10 pace. Because in my mind, you get a lot of blokes who don't really know how quickly they can run something, and they just say, yeah, I'm super fast, I'm going to run a sub 3 hour marathon. Because last year, I actually underestimated how quickly I could do it, and I was basically behind walkers. And I was running it, I ran it last year in, I think, 4 hours, 27 minutes, which is, a faster than average time for a woman. And yet I was behind like mass groups of people. So I've slightly overestimated how quickly I can do it, in the hope that everyone else who's going to run my pace has also done the same thing, so we can sort of find a nice little group together. Yeah.
I bet that will be the case, though, because everyone will be thinking like you don't want to get stuck behind. You'd rather be like clinging onto the back of a faster group.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was in a pace group, and yet there was no one, all the paces were for like people running about an hour slower than me. So I would really love to be able to find a pace this year, and I'm hoping that by putting myself in a slightly faster group, there might be someone who sort of lines up with what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, for sure. There's thousands of people. Like, you'll find someone.
Hopefully. Well, that's what everyone said last year. I mean, this is probably so unrelatable for the both of you because you've just always been at the front. But they always say with a marathon, like, you find your buddies and you find your friends, and you'll find your best friend when you're running. No. And when I was doing it last year, there was absolutely nobody.
I can relate fully to that. In all my marathons, I'm like, okay, I'm going to find a friend and we're going to run together. And then you just end up changing paces. You're like, okay, I'll run with this person. Mm-hmm. Then they're a bit too fast, or they drop back, and I've lost them. And I've always felt quite alone.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, completely. Yeah, completely. There was a girl wearing a Guide Dogs for the Blind t-shirt, and I was focusing on her for so long. And, I was sort of like thinking, gosh, am I going to go and say hello to her? I'm going to go say hello to her. And then all of a sudden, like, she found another, like, I think one of her friends, and they started chatting with each other, and it was a very sad moment where I thought I was about to find my new best friend, but she's already got a best friend, so I'm just going to stay by myself. So yeah, just basically ran it all by myself. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wish I could find friends in London Marathon, but in the elites, like, every time I've run it, the last 12 to 15K, I've been completely by myself.
Right.
Like, can't see anyone in front of me, anyone behind.
Yeah, it's a lonely race.
It's tough.
Yeah. But you do get pacemakers at the start, which is nice.
Yeah, for the first half.
And do you not get more attention from people in the crowd who are like, oh my goodness, there's a runner, let's cheer her on?
You do, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you definitely, the crowd support is really good, but it's just like keeping that pace going is so tough by yourself.
Sure.
But hey, I mean, the field this year is actually so good that I'm hoping there'll be a good little pack.
And before you head off, do you look at people on the start line with you and think, okay, I know that I'm going to be able to run a similar marathon to them. I'm going to try and stick with them. Or are you very focused on running your own race?
A bit of both, because the start list, it has everyone's PBs, but you never know what shape people are in.
Right.
And so unless you actually know what time people are going for, then it's only of like limited use. But there are normally pace groups.
Okay.
So for the first half, or sometimes if you're lucky, like 18 miles of a marathon, you get a pacer, but it's all set. It's not your individual pacer. You get a set pace group to go with. So there might be, for Chicago, for example, I was in a 2:24 pace group. So it was this like big pack. And then around halfway, it starts to break off a bit. But like, who's in that pack, and you can kind of get a feel of what people are doing. Yeah, work together.
Cool. Do you deliberately, before you go to race, do you try and hide what you're thinking you're going to try and do? Are you sort of tactical with it, or do you think marathon runners are tactical with kind of keeping their cards close to their chest and not letting on what they're hoping they're going to do?
It really depends. I'm quite open with it, because I think once you're there on the start line, like, it is what it is. I mean, I can't do any more training to go after a different time. So it's actually more helpful to know what people are doing so you can work together.
Right.
Because if you can, at the end of the day, it's, yes, you are racing people, and of course you want to beat them. But if you can help each other out a bit, like, you're both going to have a better race. So my approach is always like, okay, yeah, work together. And then, if you're together in the last 5K, hell for leather and just race. But yeah, I think most people's approach is that with a marathon, it's more like you against the marathon than you against everyone else.
So if you can help other people out, like, and someone can help you and you can take turns, you're both going to go through tough patches at different points.
Exactly.
So if it's like one person's like kind of carrying you through that bit, and then you do the same for them, it's quite that's quite a nice way to do it.
Exactly. And if you both end up finishing the race and you've had a much better day than like trying to solo run the whole thing, then great.
Wow, so interesting. See, there you go. No one would have had any idea about that. And yeah, that's really interesting. I've always wondered that. I have always wondered that. How tactical are you when it comes to how much of yourself you're giving away before you actually go to race?
Yeah, I tend to share it. I think the packs stick together till about 20 miles.
Okay.
And then certainly in elite marathon running, it's basically a 10K race at the end of 20 miles.
Oh, interesting.
And then at the last 10K, you'll see it with the Africans as well. They'll all run together. And the last 10K, like, everyone will be off.
Gosh, that's so exciting. Wow. I hope that I'm starting early enough in the day that there's that point at the London Marathon where you're crossing each other. And I really, really hope it works out where I cross the other side to you so I can see you running. I'll be like, go,
So you need to be over Tower Bridge.
Yes.
And
then
Rose
going
will be
towards
going
Canary Wharf. And then you'll be coming back from Canary Wharf.
towards Embankment, yeah.
I don't think it's going to work, but in my mind, that would be a big boost
well
for
work,
me.
yeah.
That's the best place to
speaking.
support as well, because then you see like both sides going each way.
Yeah.
So fun. I will be there watching the both of you. Cannot wait. Okay, Georgie. So our mission is, as runners, to become better runners. And that's yours too, I assume.
Yeah.
So let's chat about, if you are a beginner runner, how you get better at running.
Gosh, where to start?
Yeah, what do you think? Having been running for 2 years now, what do you, and on your second marathon, what do you think has been the biggest change for you?
Okay, right. It's a philosophy that I have that I don't always listen to, but I try to lean on it when stuff goes wrong. And it's what I'm involved with a triathlon charity called Fund Her Tri UK. And there's a lot of women involved with the charity who are just getting into running or like a slower runners. So it's a really, really inclusive space. And there's this sort of preoccupation. You know, if you were to say, for example, they're a really good runner, the association is that they're a really fast runner. And good and running, and good basically saying that someone's a good runner, it's become completely synonymous with speed. And that makes complete sense. It's where you win the medals, you know, that's what people enjoy watching. But I think to actually diversify what it means to be a good runner, I think there's so much that goes, I'm not explaining this very well, but there's so much that goes into being a good runner. You know, you need to be really on it with your fueling. You know, you need to have enough confidence in yourself when you're holding a difficult pace that you can hold on to it. You know, you need to know, you know, your biomechanics and what shoes you should be wearing. There's so much that goes into it. And actually, sometimes when I've not had a great run, and in my mind I'm like, oh, I'm a bad runner, I think, well, actually, what does that mean? It just means that I've run it slightly slower than I had before. But actually, I stayed really mentally resilient in that run. My fueling went really well. And, you know, I conquered that really tough hill. And I think basically reframing, taking the pressure off yourself to be fast and reminding yourself that, you know, when you're first getting into running, there are other ways that you can build yourself up. And yeah, there's more to being a good runner than being a fast runner. So to go back to what you said about, you know, getting better as a beginner runner, I think if you can try and sort of embody that philosophy, it sort of, you know, leads you on to other areas like tempo training and fueling properly and, you know, getting some good kit and whatever that really does step you forward. So that would probably be my main thing.
Yeah, I like that because it
makes
takes the
sense.
pressure off, and it's almost like then a byproduct of focusing on other things. Actually, you will inevitably be faster anyway, without that being like, okay, I must get faster, otherwise I failed.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are going to be some people who just aren't that fast, you know, like the average 5K time for women is 38 minutes. And, you know, by a lot of people's standards, that's really slow. It's absolutely not slow. But the amount of conversations I've had with women who have felt really sort of unconfident in their ability as runners because they feel they are bad, because they are slow, it's just really, really, I think, detrimental to people's progress. And, you know, my best friend, she won't mind me saying this, she was an incredibly unconfident runner. She was I was going to say she's a slower runner. She's not a slower runner. She is an incredibly average runner when it comes to speed. But we had this one conversation on a long run where I said, but Sophie, your ability to just keep pushing through when things get tough is incredible and so much better than people who are running at twice the speed than you. So I think when she heard that, she was like, oh, okay, there is more to being a good runner and getting better at running than just going faster. You know, there's other ways to nurture yourself. So that's kind of my main philosophy. Obviously, there are practical ways to get better as a runner if we are just, you know, putting speed at the center of it all. But just from a sort of enjoyment and philosophy point of view, I just try to sort of hold on to that. Yeah.
I love that. It's really just focusing on the process. And I think, I mean, to be honest, that's the case, whatever speed you're going, whether you are a slower runner or, you know, at my level, I still have to, there's no point me thinking I want to be faster. Like, of course I want to be faster, but I need to focus on every element of the process. And, you know, obviously I think it gets more and more marginal. The gains get more and more marginal, but it is still about just focusing on mindset, on nutrition, on footwear, on like biomechanics, all these things that go into it. And as you say, that is what makes it enjoyable, rather than just being like, right, I've got to go and hit this split. Well, okay, that's, you know, I've got to work out a way of doing that. And it's the process that is actually really fun.
Yeah.
I love that approach.
Thank you, Rose. There
Yeah.
we go.
And I think it's also worth highlighting, like, so when I say you want to get fast, but even if you are a slower runner, like everyone has their version of what faster is. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if you are like a 40-minute 5K runner, but you want to run 39:30, like that is your version of being a faster runner.
Absolutely.
It's not saying you need to be this certain speed to be faster.
To be honest, there's obviously so many things that you can do. And, you know, you both are in positions far better than me to advise. But I actually think the best way to become a better runner is just to get running. And I know that's probably sounds really unhelpful, but don't overthink it. Put on a pair of shoes and just get out there and go. I kind of got running by accident. I just basically went on a 5K with my sister and walked the majority of the thing. But suddenly in my mind, I was like, oh, I've run a 5K. And before I knew it, I was running home from work, which was like 15K. And I was probably doing it incredibly irresponsibly, but it just sort of gave me this innate confidence that I could do it. But actually, on that note, we have had a question in from a lady called Cornelia who said, how do you stay injury-free when you're increasing your mileage? And that is the one thing I think to be wary of when you're trying to get better at running, or when you first get into running, is just making sure you're doing it responsibly. So what would you both say to that?
That is, I mean, that is the common thing, isn't it? It's like you get hooked on it and get excited and then want to do more and more. But I think there are a few things. Just build it up slower than you think. And I think there's like the 10% rule. I mean, I don't know how accurate that is, and it also kind of depends where you're starting from. But just build up by, like, look at your weekly mileage and build that up slowly. But the other thing, which I see quite a few people doing, is each run has to be further or faster. And there's the mileage, but there's also the intensity. And the intensity, as Aidan, our physio, reminds us frequently, the intensity of the runs is almost the bigger cause of injury. So if you're going out and trying to crack out a 5K PB every single run, or run, 10 minutes longer every single run, like that is going to put a lot of stress on your body. And that's what's going to lead to injuries.
I think if you make it simple as well and just think, okay, I'm running 3 days a week. One of my runs, I'm going to add a bit of time onto it, rather than all 3 runs, one of them I'm going to make harder, both the others I'm going to make longer. That's just too much. If you just like focus on one of them, okay, I'm just going to add a bit of time onto this one this week. And then the following week, you're like, okay, I'm going to change one of those into being like a little bit faster. But you're only tweaking one little thing of the weekly plan, rather than like then adding in like 10 more runs one week. Like it's just, as Rose said, so gradual that you're just tweaking one little bit rather than both intensity and volume at the same time.
Okay, that is actually genuinely really interesting. And it feels, when you say it, it's like, well, obviously that makes complete sense. But I did a 5K about 4 weeks ago, and I ran a PB, and I was like, it's a 5K, it'll be fine. Of course I can go out and do my quite difficult long run the following day. And I was just absolutely exhausted. And people was like, you just ran a 5K PB. But I'm like, well, yeah, but it's just, in my mind, it's just a 5K. What does that even mean? But it's just a 5K. It's not that far. It's a distance I'm really comfortable with running. But obviously the intensity has a lot more to do with it than you realise, or at least I realise.
I mean, your body's just run faster than it ever has.
Yeah.
Over that distance. So it's definitely going to put a lot of stress on both kind of your cardio system, but also like all your ligaments and tendons and bones and everything. So, I mean, it is a lot about, I think we're so conscious of recovery, and Steph and I both make sure that we have good amount of time between our session days, and we will have those easy days in. I mean, I can't ever imagine doing back-to-back session day.
No.
It would just kill me.
Yeah.
But we're so conscious of that. But I think a lot of people starting out will like do back-to-back days and then unfortunately get injured.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where I'm going wrong, because I just like cram all my runs into like 4 days and then just like give myself a load of days off.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think if you space them out, it would feel a lot
nicer. The thing is, in theory, I think I know that I'm supposed to space them out. It's just like when you're working and you're like trying to schedule everything in, and like you've got a busy weekend, you're like, okay, I'll be able to. I always try and balance it with an easy run, or I'll try and give myself a recovery day. So I'm not completely stupid with it, but it is interesting to hear that 2 absolute speedsters don't give themselves back-to-back sessions. That's very interesting.
For example, so my mileage is high, so obviously taper this down, but I'll have like intervals on a Tuesday. I'll do at the moment, because I'm obviously training for a long race, I'll do like a long session on a Friday. So that's given me 2 days in between. Yeah. And then I'll do like a medium long run on the Sunday. Wow. So then Monday, Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday are all easy days.
Okay.
And so you've spread it out quite a bit, where I've got enough energy by the time the next session day comes to be able to push myself.
Right. Okay. I'm going to just go back to my training plan and just jiggle some things around, move my schedule around a bit, make this, slightly better for myself. Okay. That's really, really interesting. I hope that...
but I think this should be so helpful for people, because for Steph and I, it is just... second nature to do that, but I think you're so right, Georgie. Like, it's not, I have a coach telling me that, like, unless you've got someone explaining the physiology or you've been doing it for years or whatever, it's actually not obvious.
No, absolutely.
Well, and it's, I guess working whatever job you're working in and just trying to fit things in. If you've got kids, if you've got other people who are sort of dependent on you, it's trying to make the runs work when they can work within your schedule. But then at the same time, I definitely put a bit of pressure on myself because in my mind, I really, really understand the importance of recovery and I love recovery so much and I love my easy runs. But at the same time, I think you get quite used to seeing people online like going out again and again and again and again. And that might not be reality, but in my mind, when, I've done a really difficult session the day before and I go to do quite a difficult run the following day and I'm struggling with it, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, yeah, but those people that I saw online are doing it. And yeah, they seem to be fine. And obviously that's not reality. They've just happened to post on their Instagram that they've done a run that day that they actually haven't done because, they're an influencer or whatever. But actually hearing from the both of you, two people who unequivocally know what you're doing, that actually that is not the way to do it is helpful for me and just reminds me that my body, the importance of recovery is my body is a temple, precisely.
I would actually add to this as well in terms of not getting injured is add in the fueling element.
Yeah.
Because when you're building up and you're running more than you have before is actually making sure you're fueling properly for the additional runs that you're doing.
100%.
Because if you're, again, it links to recovery, like nutrition is basically part of your recovery. If you're not fueling properly, you're not going to adapt to those runs.
Absolutely.
And you end up injured.
That was actually the biggest game changer for me with training for the marathon last year was I just did not understand enough about fueling, both on runs and actually finishing runs. Like I just didn't know what my body needed. And, I think because we all, most of us live sort of relatively comfortable lifestyles and we just can sort of, food is sort of pretty available and, you can kind of just eat it whenever you want to eat it. And you're not, most of us, again, are just sort of working office jobs. You're not necessarily thinking about like exactly what your body needs to be performing optimally. And I mean, I'm not performing optimally, but at the same time, I have looked more into what I'm supposed to be eating from sort of a training point of view. It has made such a difference. That has actually been for me the thing that has made the single biggest difference to my speed as a runner. Definitely.
I love that message.
I've got another question actually from Jen. Going back to what we were sort of saying a second ago about recovery, she says, if you have to choose between a session/workout and a long run to skip, like a sick day, which would it be?
For me, I would keep the long run for marathon training.
Really? Okay.
I would keep the long run, yeah. I just feel like the long run is like the backbone of marathon training. And if you can get a bit of, if you can make that long run really good quality, everything else is a bit of a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, it's great to have another midweek session that's a bit faster, but I do think that's secondary.
When you're doing the long run, obviously you're going to be training at certain paces. Do you think it's more important that you just get the distance in your legs, or do you think it's more important that say you're not feeling particularly well, or like you're a bit run down or whatever, and you've got to go out and do that long run? Do you think the priority is getting the distance in your legs, or do you think it's hitting the speeds?
I think it's the time on feet.
I agree. I think it's the time on feet. And I think if you can make it a bit harder, that's great.
Sure.
But yeah, I think step A is time on feet.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, again, it comes back to enjoyment as well. Like, if I get times are really important to people, but if you can get through the marathon and get through a long run, that gives you so much confidence for the day, and your body can actually do it.
Sure.
So it's going to be far more enjoyable. Even if you do end up running a bit slower, at least, you can get to the finish line and it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Also, time on feet, wearing a good pair of shoes, that's a massive thing.
Yes.
For getting better or just getting into running, making sure you're actually wearing kit that suits you and works for you. The power that a good pair of trainers can make is crazy.
And I know trainers are expensive these days, but I feel like running as a whole, you've just got to invest in that good pair of trainers,
totally.
And you're going to be using them. So it's money well spent. If you can have a good pair, then it's going to do wonders.
Go and get gait analysis, go to your local sports shop and get someone to look at your feet. That's for me has really helped. I had a pair of shoes that I bought new and I ran in them for about a month, and it was just my least favourite month of running ever because they just did not work for me. Got them out, just took the hit, bought a new pair, and I was straight back into it. It just, really matters.
And please replace your trainers once you've worn them out.
Think about how much impact goes into your feet.
Yeah.
I just think you need to treasure them.
Yeah, look after them. Absolutely. We've actually had another question in from Sophie, and she has said, what do you tell yourself mentally to get through those runs where you want to give up? What would you say?
Oh, I love this question. I've got so many.
You go first.
I think one thing I always come back to is how do I want to feel at the end?
Right.
Because you can get so much interference with how you feel at the moment. And this is something Steph and I talk about a lot, is like, I think when you're running and you're struggling, the tendency is to hyper focus on how you feel and, go through the check. Oh, is my leg a bit sore? Is my foot a bit sore? Are my legs tired? Is my breathing a bit too hard? And you go through this like constant battle with your body about wanting to feel good. And the reality is, like, running is hard. Running hard is really hard. It's not going to feel great. So forget about it. Like, forget about trying to feel good. And instead, I try to focus on how I want to feel at the end, which is normally absolutely done. And like, I've tried really hard and, that really great exhausted feeling at the end.
Yeah, no, completely. And I also think maybe just questioning, why are you wanting to give up? Like if you have that thought like, oh, what's the point? Like, I may as well stop. Like, why, what's triggering that? Is it because you think you're running slower than you should? Doesn't matter. You'd rather finish the run than stop just because you were running a bit slower than you wanted to.
Yeah.
Like, you have way more satisfaction thinking, wow, I really struggled during that, but I got to the end. Versus like, oh, I didn't hit my splits, so like I just stopped halfway.
Sure.
So I think, you're always, as Rose said, you're going to have negative thoughts, but think about how proud you'll be to finish that run when you are struggling.
Do you have anything practical that you do? Like, I don't know if you guys listen to anything as you're running, but like, would you, for example, change what you're listening to, or do you like consciously slow down? Is there anything that you do that's physical to sort of remind yourself to like keep on pushing through?
I literally visualize chucking out the thought.
Do you?
So I'll be like, right, I think and this is something my sports psychologist has worked with me on. There are kind of steps to getting rid of those negative thoughts. First, you've got to identify them. Sometimes that's harder than you think, because I find sometimes I'll realise I'm like in this negative cycle, but I've been in it for a few minutes and not thought about it. So step one is recognise, okay, I've got some negative thoughts here. Step two, find some way that works for you that you can actually visualise like getting rid of them. So it can be, chucking them away or whatever it is. And then replace. So the third step is replace it with something else. So it can be like, okay, look around you. Like, appreciate what you're doing, and if you're hopefully you're running in a nice place and you can look at the trees or whatever and think, okay, or focus on your leg tone over and something that feels good.
Yeah. Okay.
And just replace that thought with something positive or that can distract you.
And the more and more you practice doing stuff like that and you almost prepare for that to happen so you know what you're going to think of, it starts becoming an automatic process. So like negative thought comes in and you know straight away what you have to do to get rid of it. Yeah. And that will become easier and easier each time. And I think, distraction is just such a good one. Like one of the things I always do is if it's feeling hard, I'll be like, okay, just get to that bench or that tree over there and then reassess. And often actually by the time you get to that point, you do feel a bit different. Like you've thought about something else and your mindset's kind of shifted by the time you you break it down. And I think distraction is such a good one.
So interesting. I wish I had known this a month ago when I was going through my flu dilemma and used this advice when I was, battling through my runs and feeling like I was failing all of them. Oh, that's really, really interesting. Okay, on that note, we have got one more question from the lovely Emma. Question from Emma. How do you keep up running during cold winters as a solo woman with a 9-to-5 job? That's kind of what Boldly's for, right?
Yes. I was going to say, I'm not sure we're the ones to really be able to say we do this enthusiastically, but we do it. And I think run groups is such a good way to do it, which is why we started Boldly, because there is this huge problem, I think, particularly being female, and it's dark after you finish work and you've got to go out and do your run. So not only is that extremely difficult mentally to get out, especially when it's cold, but it's often not safe, which is the whole reason we started Boldly, to raise awareness of it and actually give people options to go and join groups that you can run with safely. And it just makes it so much easier to get out.
It really
doesn't
does.
it?
If you know you're going to meet someone or you're going to meet a group, the motivation to get out is just so much higher. And I think, not only are you then kind of eliminating not feeling safe, you're also enjoying it way more. So I mean, often I'll be messaging people most days like, do you want to run with me tomorrow? Because even if it's not dark, I just want to get out in the cold. I just need some company. It makes it way easier.
Stops you thinking about getting out as well.
Yeah.
Like if I've got somewhere to be and I've got to be there at a certain time, like I won't go through that whole process of I don't want to do it, or I'm going to just procrastinate for another 5 minutes. Like you're just out the door before you thought about it.
Yeah, actually, I need to be here at this time, and then you'll be running with someone else. So if you can run with people, I think that is the main thing. Another option, if you can't run with people, and I did this last night, it was dark on my run in the evening, I rang my mum. And actually, I automatically felt a bit sick because I went down a bit of a dodgy path and I was like, ooh, I wasn't sure. But I was chatting on the phone and that automatically made me feel a little bit safer just because I knew I was on the phone and it felt like I was with someone even though I was running on my own. So, call a friend.
But that's actually as well, I mean, it goes back to getting better as a runner, being a beginner runner. Like, do not be put off by run clubs because actually there is, particularly now, there is such a massive community of people out there who are really getting into running. There's all sorts of paces, run clubs once upon a time were, for the, speediest people ever. But now there are some really, really, really inclusive groups to run with. So, I think to go back to what we were saying earlier, if you're a beginner or you're trying to get better at running, go run with people, go join a run club. It just adds a whole other dimension to running. It just keeps it interesting and different and,
And you meet friends.
Yeah.
Find your friends that
Yeah.
you want to find in the marathon. Go find them in a run club.
Well, didn't you guys meet at run club? Or like a
well,
running
we're
group?
in the same training group. So, I guess you can count it as that.
I met you guys at your running club.
Yeah, exactly.
There you
It's
go.
a
And now
great
here we
way.
are.
And people are now meeting their lifelong partners through running clubs, which
I met
we kind of
Charlie,
did. Yeah, and I
yeah.
met Joe through running clubs.
Oh, did
so,
you?
yes.
Well, I've literally just started a film and TV running club, and it's sort of an opportunity to network because you've got people there who are like really, really amazing, quite senior directors, and then you've got people who are like at the absolute sort of entry level roles. Like you've got actual runners, pardon the pun, who are joining this group, and in what world would you ever have this complete level playing field between people? So it's just a very sort of humbling and great way for people to connect, and very humbling. I'm a big fan of run clubs. And to go back to your question, Emma, if you can find a group to run with, then you should.
Yes, and if you're in the Putney area, come join Boldly. Well, those were some fantastic questions. And if you are listening and want to submit some questions for the next 6th mile, please do that via our Instagram and we would be delighted to answer them.
And Georgie, thank you so much for joining us on the sofa. And we can't wait for you to be part of 5 Miles Easy going forward.
Thank you for having me. Next time I will not be on the sofa. I'll be firmly behind the camera. But it's been very enjoyable.
Thanks for joining us for 5 Miles Easy.
See you next time.